Senator Ludlam.
Thank you, Chair. I rise to add my condolences to those of my colleagues on all sides of the chamber from the horror that occurred on the weekend, and pay my respects to the 3 fallen Australians whose sacrifice is appreciated by all of us. Also to the Afghan interpreter who was killed, and to the many who were terribly injured. Our thoughts are with them and their families. It's worth noting in passing with a sense of sadness that we don't speak to the names of each of Australia's fallen troops now because there are so many. We stand in silence in acknowledgement of their sacrifice, but simply don't have time as a parliament to speak to them all as we used to. 32 in a decade, and a third of them fallen in only the last 12 months. If there has been such progress, if things look as wonderful on the ground as Senator Feeney has been describing, it appears that the violence that our troops have been exposed to is only getting worse. More than 2,700 coalition dead, the cost in lives of this war, and uncounted Afghan civilian tolls. If this parliament stood in silence momentarily and acknowledged the civilian loss of life in Afghanistan, we wouldn't have time to conduct any business at all. But the estimate over the last 4 years of nearly 9,000 Afghan civilians killed in the conflict, with civilian deaths increasing each year. And it is these profoundly disturbing numbers of civilian dead that I think give the lie to the picture that has been painted that we are in this struggle for the long haul and that all we need to do is stay the course and eventually there will be some kind of happy ending. We will be able to depart the country with some form of democracy in place. Tell the truth. Tell the Australian people the truth. Why is it so difficult to even have these issues debated in the Australian Parliament, that we wouldn't even have had a mature debate in this Parliament if Senator Brown hadn't got that into the agreement with the Gillard government last August? Tell the truth as to why, after a decade in this quagmire, there is now the strongest opposition in the Australian people. A recent Essential Media poll showed that 64% of Australians think that troops should withdraw. That's up from 56% this March and just under half about this time last year. This is now a profoundly unpopular war. It is justified, as we heard to some degree by some of the previous speakers, that this has been a great cause for the emancipation of women. A June 2011 trust law report by the Thomas Reuters Foundation found that violence, dismal health care and brutal poverty make Afghanistan the world's most dangerous country for women. After a 10-year occupation, Afghanistan has emerged as the most dangerous country for women overall, and the worst in 3 of the 6 risk categories: health, non-sexual violence and lack of access to economic resources. So tell us the truth. The government spokespeople, the opposition spokespeople who stand up in here and tell us that things will be fine if we simply toe the line. What if that is not true? The German General Kujat has told the German Daily only a month ago now, or in July of this year, he says the mission fulfilled the political aim of showing solidarity with the United States. But if you measure progress against the goal of stabilising a country and a region, then the mission has failed. No such honesty from Australian policymakers. We catch a glimpse, of course, of how this war is really seen in the high levels of the United States government. Again, thanks to the huge release of State Department diplomatic cables, thanks to the audacity, I suppose, of the WikiLeaks organisation. Ambassador Carl Eikenberry, who served in Afghanistan as a 3-star general, at the end of an October 9 cable marked confidential, says, "One of our major challenges in Afghanistan is how to fight corruption and connect the people to their government when the key government officials are themselves corrupt." In another cable, he says, this one quoted in Bob Woodward's book on the war behind the scenes, Obama's war, "Right now we're dealing with an extraordinarily corrupt government. And these are our partners," and that underscores the tragedy of the events that we saw over the weekend when Senator Faulkner says we are there at the invitation of the Afghan government. We are there at the invitation of the United States government. Let's be absolutely clear about why we were there. This is the only time in its history that the ANZUS Treaty has been invoked. Prime Minister Howard, without recourse to Parliament, put us into that war, took us directly into that conflict. And that, I think, tells us more than anything else. The debate in Australia is bland, it is uninformative, and it is superficial compared with the depth of the debate that has occurred in the many other countries that Senator Milne outlined where the troops have been withdrawn. The debate has been had, the facts were put on the table, a deadline was set, and then the troops were drawn down. No such debate here in Parliament. This strange, shallow, bipartisan willingness to simply tug the forelock and carry on. And not a single parliamentarian in this place, unless you happen to have a seat at Cabinet, has the ability to do anything about it, because this Parliament has never granted itself the so-called war power, the ability to sign off on troop deployments and then call them home. And these are not military decisions. These are deeply diplomatic and political decisions that, as parliamentarians, before we can turn up, Senator Faulconer being the exception as a former serving Defence Minister who has attended funerals and told this very chamber of the tragic and gruesome updates of the conflict that he was trying to manage, most of the other people who come into this chamber and discuss the matter have absolutely no power whatsoever to do anything about it, because that matter has been reserved to the executive, and there is still this stale bipartisan consensus that, unlike most partner countries and most other countries in which we would consider to be our peers, where that power has been devolved from the executive to at least give some say to the Parliament, including Westminster, including the United States Congress. No such luck here in Australia. So parliamentarians will file in here and express their ongoing confidence and support for the war, knowing full well that even if they agree, there'd be absolutely nothing that they could do about it. You can come in here and we do, conduct a debate, try and put the facts on the table, but in fact it's the Prime Minister's call. And we saw that most tragically, I think, even more tragically than the instance that we're debating now, in the instance of the war in Iraq, where the executive, premised on a lie and against the will of the vast majority of Australian people and against, arguably, international legal opinion, took us to war in Iraq at enormous civilian, military and resource cost on the basis of a lie. So when will the debate finally come to Parliament? We can sit down now, having had our say, having perhaps felt a little bit better that we've got a few things off our chest, expressed our support for the people that we've put in harm's way, but what can we actually do about it in this Parliament? I think it is time that the debate in Australia got some maturity about it. Let us hear from the people who have served on the front line, but let us also hear from the Afghan people. When people in here disclaim that we're wanted there, that we're there at the invitation of the Afghan government, it's being run as something somewhere on the spectrum between a barely functioning new democracy and an organised crime syndicate. These are the people that we have signed up to as our partners in Afghanistan. And I think we do owe it to the people that we put in harm's way not to wait for a quiet patch when the attention's gone away, with full respect to the people who've paid the ultimate sacrifice, and ask the question, why are we there? Do we need to be there? How long are we planning on being there for? And what are the conditions that we would call a success? At what point will we say our work there is done? Because in the piece by Hugh White that I think Senator Milne was quoting on, I think it is understood that perhaps within months of a withdrawal, or this is not Professor White, this is one of the people that he quotes, it may well be that the corrupt government that's being propped up at the moment wouldn't last a matter of months. And at what point do we think that it would last? Will it be on its feet? Do we need to be there for another decade? These are the questions that need to be asked, and they're simply not, because of this stale bipartisan consensus that we will soldier on until the United States government tells us we can go. And surely we can do better than that.